first great emperor in Indian history is Chandragupta, a guy named Chandragupta. We don't know much about him. And the sources we have, by the way, he's the first, confirmed historical figure mentioned in both Eastern and Western sources. Okay, contemporary of Alexander the Great. Where he came from, we don't know. Lots of sources on this guy: Buddhist sources, Jain sources, Latin, Greek, Brahminical sources. According to the Buddhists, conveniently, he came from the Shakya clan, the same clan that, Siddhartha Gautama came from, the Buddha. According to the Jains, he was connected to the Nanda family, the Nanda dynasty. Now, the India of Chandragupta's time, at least when he was a child, this is an India emerging supposedly out of a clan-based history, a clan-based system. There's an era of what are known as the Mahajanapadas, these major clans. There's supposedly 16 of these kingdoms or polities, some of them republics, mostly in North India, until one had come to dominate the rest, or at least most of the rest. That one was called Magadha. And it was Magadha that the Nandas, the Magadhan throne, that the Nandas had usurped. And supposedly they were pretty much universally hated and considered robber kings. Anyway, that's the Nandas. And according to Jain accounts, Chandragupta came from this line. Most of the sources we have place Chandragupta in the warrior caste, Kshatriya caste, but they're contradictory in many other details, so we're not sure where he came from. Traditionally, though, as a youth, he was, his father was killed. His mother was forced to abandon him. He was, pawned off to his uncle and raised as a cowherd and as a hunter. Now, according to Plutarch, a young teenage Chandragupta actually met Alexander the Great. Now, who knows if such a meeting took place? But if it did, it probably took place in Taxila or Takshashila, what is now in northern Pakistan. We know Alexander was there. Popularly, this meeting is what supposedly gave, Chandragupta the idea, the ambition to create an empire of his own, observing Alexander the Great. Who knows if that's true? In any case, he was probably in Taxila, Chandragupta, studying at university there, studying economics and politics and who knows what else, preparing for a rebellion against the Nandas. Soon after his supposed meeting with Alexander, he would have launched this rebellion. It would have lasted 3 or 4 years. He took down the Nandas eventually. He laid siege to Pataliputra, their capital. He made it his capital and eventually carved out an empire over the next 20 plus years that could be India's greatest ever. Now, according to tradition, all of Chandragupta's major accomplishments should actually be attributed to another man, Chanakya, a wily, often brutal Brahmin named Chanakya, or Kautilya, as he's often known as well. Chanakya hated the Nandas, evidently. And he saw in Chandragupta, in the boy Chandragupta, one who was worthy to rule. According to the story, he bought him, or he took him on as his protege, took him to Taxila, where Chanakya worked in the university. He taught economics and political science and whatever. And anyway, trained him for years to be a king, to take down the hated Nandas. And so according to this tradition, it's Chanakya that was the real power and the real brains behind the throne. It was Chanakya that was the real creator of the Mauryan Empire. Now, who knows if any of this is true, but that's the tradition. To Chanakya, too, is attributed the authorship of the great Machiavellian treatise, the political treatise, the Arthashastra. Okay, this is realpolitik at its worst, or at its best, depending on your political view and how you think states should be run. But for decades, the Arthashastra was considered as a vital peek into how the Mauryan Empire was actually run. But recent scholarship has cast doubt on Chanakya's authorship of the Arthashastra. It doesn't help that he and Kautilya may not even be the same person, or that the oldest text we have of the Arthashastra, which is very incomplete, wasn't written down till 500 years after Chanakya's death. Throw in the fact that it appears very, very likely that what we do have, the text we do have, was actually written by multiple authors, and Chanakya's authorship is very much in doubt. But in any case, according to tradition, it was Chanakya who found, identified, took in as a protege and trained and prepared Chandragupta to take down the Nandas. It was Chanakya who, at his own personal expense, assembled and raised Chandragupta's first army. Again, attributing all great things to Chanakya, all of Chandragupta's supposed accomplishments. And together, Chandragupta and Chanakya, after some initial setbacks, took down the Nanda army. And that was a major military accomplishment, by the way. The Nanda army evidently had hundreds of thousands of troops, 6,000 war elephants. And keep in mind that when Alexander the Great, who'd conquered so much of the world, when he got to India, and he conquered the Punjab, when he got to the edge of Magadha territory, the edge of Nanda territory, and received intelligence about the Nanda army, that was enough to convince him, or at least convince his men, that this was it. Their quest for world domination was over and they needed to turn around. That's the army that Chandragupta and Chanakya took down. And all this he did by the time he was just 20. According to Plutarch, it was now Chandragupta who had the massive army. 600,000 men, 9,000 war elephants, and with this great force, he subdued most of India. And after the death of Alexander, the bulk of the eastern part of his erstwhile empire fell into the hands of one of his former generals, a guy named Seleucus. Now, against Seleucus, Chandragupta now turned. And we know that Seleucus probably didn't fare very well in this battle between the two, because he ended up ceding to Chandragupta not just territory around the Indus, but also what is today southern Afghanistan, Baluchistan. I mean, he's pushing into Persia, Chandragupta is, at this point. So this is a massive east-west empire, stretching from Bengal in the east all the way to Baluchistan and Afghanistan in the west. Now, to secure that peace, Seleucus may have given Chandragupta his own daughter to wife. We know he sent an ambassador named Megasthenes to Chandragupta's court. To return the favor, Chandragupta gifted Seleucus 500 Indian war elephants. There's a signal of his power, a mark of his power there. Those war elephants, by the way, are going to change history. They're really going to help Seleucus out thousands of miles away. But that's another story. Having created this vast east-west empire, we assume Chandragupta then looked south, and one by one the southern kingdoms fell to his massive armies as he subdued the subcontinent. Because he never got the very far south. Tamil country remained unconquered. Even his very successful successors, including the famous Ashoka, never conquered Tamil country. But, Kalinga would eventually be conquered. Chandragupta probably didn't conquer Kalinga. Ashoka would do that. But still, vast territory, probably bigger territorially, or possibly bigger at least, than even that of the Mughals, than even that of the British. This is the largest Indian empire, potentially, in history that we know of. At the very least, what Chandragupta did was create the first empire that stretched from sea to sea, from the Bay of Bengal to the Arabian Sea. That had never been done before, as far as we know. And this is important stuff. This is important because to the nationalist narrative today, I mean, you need a pan-Indian precedent stretching back to antiquity. There really is none, unless you want to point to foreign precedents in the British, or you want to point to Muslim precedents. If you're a Hindu nationalist, you need that ancient precedent for pan-Indian unity, for a single polity. And Chandragupta Maurya provides that. Well, Chandragupta Maurya ruled his empire for 23 years. And then he disappears. So where'd he go? Well, according to Jain sources, he abdicated the throne. He didn't disappear, he abdicated the throne, gave it to his son, because he had become a faithful follower of Jainism. He'd become a disciple of one of the great Jain teachers of all time, Bhadrabahu. And he followed Bhadrabahu along with 12,000 other disciples of the man to South India. In fact, right here, to between these two rock hills. This is still a Jain center to this day. Hey, this is where they came, in modern-day Karnataka. Well, Chandragupta Maurya spent his last years living the life of a Jain ascetic. Right on this hill, actually. Chandragiri is what it's called. 2,300 years after his death, this hill is called Chandragiri. And it's here, too, where he went through the Jain ritual suicide known as Salekana, according to which you starve yourself to death. It's considered, the ultimate form of self-denial, the ultimate act of, conquest of one's passions. Several hundred Jains continue to, perform Salekana every year in India to this day. I mean, that's what Chandragupta did. That's how the great emperor who'd conquered the Nandas, who'd conquered the Greeks, who'd conquered most of India, ended his life with a conquest of himself.